Alrighty, welcome everybody to How to Make Clean Energy Upgrades More Accessible to Renters. My name is Lily Smith, and I'm so excited to be able to help host our second installment in SEIA's Energy Insecurity webinar series. I'm going to go through a couple of administrative details while more people file on. First things first, please note that the webinar is being recorded. If you have questions, you could submit them in the Q&A box, and our panelists will respond after the presentation. Following the webinar, we'll send out the recording, slide deck, and resources mentioned in the presentation to all registrants. There will be a short survey immediately following the webinar, and we would surely appreciate your feedback. I'm going to invite Joy to share screen and get this presentation going. Great. Hello, everyone. Oh, okay. Joy, could you go to the second slide for me, please? Absolutely. Okay, before we hop into today's content, we wanted to go ahead and provide a bit of context to the work that SEIA does in the Southeast. SEIA promotes efficient energy as a catalyst for economic growth, workforce development, and energy security across our 11 Southeastern states. We provide research, consultation and education, stakeholder facilitation, program management, and financial services to a range of stakeholders working in the energy sector. Relevant to today's conversation and to give more historical context to energy insecurity as a persistent issue in the Southeast is the Energy Insecurity Story Map produced in collaboration with the Texas Energy Poverty Research Institute, TEPRI for short. I will drop that link in a moment, but for now, I'll go ahead and turn things over to our research associate, Joy Ward.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to How to Make Clean Energy Upgrades More Accessible to Renters. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Joy Ward, and I serve as SEIA's Energy Research Associate. I'm joined by my colleague, Lily Smith, and as well as our special guest, Duanne Andrade, Executive Director of the Solar and Energy Loan Fund. SEIA inherited the Southeast Energy Insecurity Stakeholder Initiative, a report containing a series of stakeholder recommendations addressing energy insecurity in the region for the Nichols Institute at Duke University in 2022. In response, SEIA has begun work on the Southeast Energy Insecurity Project to implement the recommendations outlined by Duke. Two initiatives include the formation of a leadership forum and the development of this webinar series. We'll drop a link in the chat regarding the specifics of the awards and the project initiatives. In addition, the webinar series was created to complement these recommendations as a whole. There are 24 recommendations that fall into 6 working groups, including systemic change, housing, which is what we will be discussing today, awareness and community engagement, which was our previous webinar, data access and improvement, programs and access to financing, and utility solutions. We are hosting 6 webinars based on these working groups. Today, we are talking about the housing set of recommendations. On that note, I have the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker, Duanne Andrade, Executive Director of the Solar Energy Loan Fund. Here is Duanne's bio. Maria Duanne Andrade, she, her pronouns, is the Executive Director of the Solar and Energy Loan Fund. Duanne co-led SELF for 10 years as the Chief Financial and Strategic Officer before assuming as Executive Director. She is responsible for creating SELF's green home loan program's successful underwriting method based on ability to repay, and has led other innovative green loan programs, including SEIA Landlord Loan Program, designed to incentivize energy efficiency investments in multifamily rental properties to reduce energy burdens for low-income renters, and SELF's SAGE home loan program aimed at catalyzing investments in small to mid-sized new affordable workforce housing developments led by BIPOC and female novice developers. Duanne led SELF's strategic developments, including the capital raising efforts and innovative program development. Duanne has a bachelor's degree in political science and economics from New York University, NYU, and a master's of business administration, MBA, from Harvard International Institute of Development, HIID program of the Catholic University of Santa Cruz, Bolivia. Andrade serves on the board of Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance, SEIA, the advisory board for Ponce Bank, advisory board of the National Development Council, NDC's CILF program, and was a past advisory board member of the Southeast Energy Insecurity Project led by Duke University's Nichols Institute. Duanne has testified in front of Senate and Congress on behalf of the climate bill, which is now in effect through the Inflation Reduction Act, and has been a keynote speaker and presenter in many national events, including congressional staff briefings, webinars, and more. Please join me in welcoming our speaker, and now I'll turn it over to Duanne.
Well, hello. Wow, that was long. Sorry about that.
It's a great one.
Oh, it's great to be here. I'm a very proud board member of SIA, and I'm just very happy to be here with you all today, talking about these topics that I have a deep passion for, and also that SELF has been working with for the past 12 years. So should we just jump right in? I think I need to share my screen.
Yes, please.
So can I just do it over this? Okay.
Yes, you should be able to.
All right. Okay. Well, so today I'm going to be introducing SELF to you all. And then I'm going to talk about the specific topic at hand, which is how do we address the split incentive issue, basically the lack of incentives for landlords to reduce energy burdens for renters. And then I'm going to jump into IRA. So here we go. SELF is the Solar and Energy Loan Fund. We are based out of Florida. We're a nonprofit CDFI, also green bank. And we have a footprint across the state of Florida, Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina, and soon some other states as well. Our mission is to rebuild and empower underserved communities by providing accessible and affordable financing for climate resilient, energy efficient, and clean energy projects that will help create healthy, resilient, and sustainable communities for all. The background on SELF is that we were the first green CDFI created in the Southeast. We were actually created by St. Lucie County with the ARA funds back in 2009. It was a $3 million seed grant from the Department of Energy's Energy Efficiency Block Grant, which, by the way, they still have those programs. And we were founded with a vision to jumpstart the clean energy economy by creating by stimulating green jobs while helping homes reduce energy costs and build resilience and reduce carbon footprint. This was basically an experiment that 20 states across the nation received this $3 million kind of catalytic award. And of those 20, only 5 of us survive to this day. So to date, we have leveraged those $3 million with a total of, actually, we've raised $40 million in new capital, but we've deployed 30 million of those in over 2,800 home improvement loans that are unsecured loans to single family homeowners. All those projects are for climate resiliency and energy efficiency upgrades. We also have leveraged the $5 million grant that we received from JP Morgan Chase Pro Neighborhood Grant Award back in 2019. And we've leveraged that with about what's going to be a total of over $100 million in private capital investment to leverage and create over 500 new affordable housing units. So one of the things that I just want to make sure that I am conveying to you all is the ability for community-based organizations, intermediaries, green banks, loan funds, basically mission-driven lenders to leverage capital. Until recently, SELF was the only green bank in the Southeast and is still the only green CDFI in the nation. Our vision really is to play an integral role in advancing climate equity with private and public and nonprofit partners and creating viable programs that will help LMI communities transition to a thriving clean energy economy that will ensure a sustainable future for generations to come. The way we focus on developing all our programs is through a triple bottom line impact model. So we're always trying to capture the impacts that we have in the social justice, environmental, and economic justice spheres. This is something that is core to what we do. And probably this is why we embraced resilience way before it was a popular term or even subject back in 2014. So we we were founded in 2009. First loan was deployed 2012. And by 2014, we said, you know what? We can't just force energy efficiency and solar on low and moderate income homeowners or homes when there's so many other basic repairs they need to do to their homes. And when, every year we're facing hurricanes and, people need to strengthen their homes. So we embraced resiliency way back then and started financing upgrades to roofs, windows, doors, hurricane shutters, and even disability and aging in place. The whole purpose is to advance that kind of sustainable home. And it really has proven to be critical for us to help in this transition to a clean energy economy, is to help fulfill the capital needs for going through all the steps to make a home safer, to make a home more resilient and solar ready. So why do we need to scale investments in resiliency, energy efficiency, and low carbon housing in the Southeast? And my focus is going to be in the Southeast region because we are in that region. But it doesn't mean that this model is exclusively applicable in this region. So the Southeast is the most vulnerable region to severe weather events, including hurricanes, extreme heat, and sea level rise. More people are cost burdened in the South than any other part of the country. More than a third of households have trouble paying their energy bills. The Southeast has the lowest average FICO scores and the highest rates of underbanked populations, which is the barrier to accessing capital to make these improvements that we are addressing. And the Southeast also has high energy and home insurance bills that disproportionately impact low-income households and communities of color. And on that note, I do want to say that the insurance issue is just a very important topic to keep an eye on, because every year during hurricane season in Florida and other states, almost the same day that hurricane season is announced, that same day or the next day or days before, thousands of people are being dropped by insurers. And there's a big question right now on how are homeowners going to insure their homes, because, for example, in Florida, many of the insurance companies have actually left the state, don't want to work in the state. And it's a matter of affordability as well. So if a low and moderate income person has a home, it's their only asset, it's generational wealth, it's wealth building. We can provide capital to improve their roofs and strengthen their homes and create energy efficiency to reduce energy burdens, and then even go solar. But if they can't access insurance in the next climate event, they may lose it all. So this is another issue that is very, very important to keep an eye out for and to help address. And one of the ways to address that is by helping people upgrade their homes with higher wind resistant codes that will then allow them to access insurance again at an affordable rate. So what are the capital gaps that SELF is filling with its loan programs? We have a loan program for homeowners. These are unsecured loans for resilient, energy efficient, and clean energy upgrades to single family and small multifamily properties. These loans are based on ability to repay, not on credit scores. Then we have a loan for landlords. Again, unsecured capital to make energy efficiency and resiliency rehabs or upgrades for affordable rental and workforce housing. This is mainly small to mid-scale, like up to 25 units. And then we have a loan program for developers, which provides pre-development and construction gap funding for green affordable housing, tied in with training and technical assistance. And then we have some working capital loans through partners like National Development Council, but we also have advanced funding for our contractors that are in our network. So how are loans different from traditional lenders? Our loans are mission driven with a focus on climate equity. So basically, we're trying to provide capital by overcoming the traditional barriers of, for example, low credit scores. So all of our loans are based on ability to repay rather than credit scores. And we have a special program with the lowest interest rate for people with 0 credit scores, which is run through our Kiva program, which is a crowdfunded peer-to-peer lending program. So in the process of protecting properties and homes and lives and health, we are also helping rebuild credit, advancing financial inclusion. Our loans foster green jobs. So we work through a network of pre-approved contractors that have to apply to become one of our contractors that can use our financing. And we don't charge any dealer fees at all. There's no charge to any contractor. And we help them open up markets that would otherwise not be available to them. For example, our contractors tell us that they lose between 20 and 40% of deals because they don't have the right financing tool for working class families that may need a roof repair or a new air conditioner. They tell us that many people don't qualify for traditional lending, or if they do, they're basically falling into the hands of predatory lenders. So they end up losing that job opportunity. With our financing, they're able to access these markets and increase their businesses. I have an example of a local AC company here in Fort Pierce, Florida. Small mom pop company has done over $1.3 million of projects with our financing. The loans, I already talked about financial inclusion. And then also our latest program, which I'm really proud of and I love, is capital for novice developers, mainly BIPOC and female property owners that want to become landlords and that don't have experience as developers, but are sitting on land that could potentially provide housing in a moment of a huge affordable housing crisis. And we'll find that throughout the Southeast states, there are several people in low and moderate income communities and Black communities and Hispanic or Latin communities that actually own property that is undeveloped or has dilapidated housing. Those properties could turn into affordable housing or workforce housing opportunities if there was capital available to them. And the reason why they're not building and the reason why there's not more inclusion of BIPOC in the development industry is because of lack of capital. So we've created a program to address that issue. So just these are some of the results that we have. We've deployed $30 million that benefits over 7,000 residents. The residents have achieved healthier, more affordable and resilient homes. And it's important, again, to capture the benefits beyond just the energy savings. On average, people are saving 25% on energy bills. But really what matters to our clients, per their own responses, is the increased well-being, the health impacts, and the fact that they can advance they can rebuild their credit and advance financial inclusion. 77% of our clients are benefiting from this credit rebuilding, and we are serving people with average low credit scores, 50% less than 640 and about 27% less than 600 credit scores. And again, our rates are not based on lower credit scores. In fact, our way of looking at equitable financing is by providing the lower cost financing to the lowest credit score person, because we are trying to help them advance themselves and get out of this instead of spending all their money paying more for what already is expensive capital. Our default rate with these unsecured loans, 30 million in loans, 74% to LMI clients, is less than 2%. So once again, proving that LMI clients are credit worthy in spite of low credit scores. We also have leveraged the $4.6 million that we invested in affordable new housing and community land trusts with 100 million. That 300 is now changed to 500, which is great. And then in terms of carbon reduction and energy savings, we have a 25% of savings on energy bills, 1,700 metric tons of carbon emissions avoided, equivalent to 193,000 gallons of gasoline. All this is using a EPA converter of energy savings, and then jobs created. So how do we create these programs? How do we come up with this? We basically partner with local governments and housing authorities to help create and preserve resilient energy efficient, affordable housing. We are an implementation tool for climate equity and resiliency goals. So for example, a local government in a state that does not have policy that's conducive to helping address climate, the local governments many times will take action into their own hands and will commit to renewable goals. The question is, how do they do that? So we become an implementation tool, much like CDFIs are the implementation kind of grassroots boots on the ground for many of the US Treasury funds and programs. We also customize programs with local government and community partners to make sure that we're addressing the local needs, and we leverage this capital. So now I'm going to talk specifically about the topic of how do we address the energy burdens in rental homes. And this is a program that we created with the Atlanta Housing Authority, and basically trying to crack the nut on how to expand benefits of energy efficiency to renters that have no control over their housing and the investments made in their housing. So what we did is the Atlanta Housing Authority called us. This is their program. And what we did is facilitate with the capital. They said, we've come up with an incentive. We're going to try and incentivize our landlords in the Housing Choice Voucher Program to make investments in energy efficiency upgrades that will reduce the energy burden for our renters. So the way we've thought about it, they said, is that we're going to provide a rent boost up to $175 for those who make the maximum investment in energy efficiency that will reach a 25% energy cost reduction. So what we did is we said, okay, let's work with this. We designed a flexible SEER, it's called SEER loan. It's an unsecured loan with monthly repayments below the rent boost. So the landlord rent boost was $175, self-loan repayment, maximum loan repayment for the maximum level of rent boost was $173. So they're cash flow positive with $2, not much, but the point is that they don't have to take any capital out of pocket. And they also don't have to use their property to secure the capital. So the key area of focus was making access to the rent boost easy with easy capital. We wanted to keep the investment with a cash flow positive, and we want to make sure we were measuring. So the Atlanta Housing Authority created an auditing method to gauge the energy savings investments, and this was done in partnership with Southface. So this is kind of what it looked like. They came up with a tiered rent boost. There was a bronze level that if the landlord made investments that would produce about 10% energy savings, then the rent boost would be $50. And this may have changed a little bit. So this is more of an example than the actual numbers. The silver level reached approximately 15% in energy savings, and then the rent boost would be $75. And what are we talking about here? LED lights, low flow, toilets and sinks, and maybe there is a solar water heater, but then the platinum level really does it all, weatherization, insulation, and reaches that 25% of savings, mainly with a high efficiency air conditioner or heat pump nowadays is a big thing. In that case, the rent boost is $175. So they designed this tier. They go out, do an audit, assess what can be done, and then authorize the rent boost. And then the landlord makes the investment and gets the rent boost, which stays in place permanently. So this is what we came up with. You'll go on our website. If you go on our website, you'll see this. It's energy efficiency and resiliency loans for landlords to upgrade rental homes to reduce energy for low-income tenants. This is a really good example of how a local partner or local housing authority can work with intermediaries to design these programs and unlock these benefits for low-income renters. So what were the impacts? For residents, reduced energy burden, goal reduction of 25% in energy bills. The residents will free up cash flow to redirect to other basic needs, excuse the typos. The residents will benefit from increased health and quality of life in home. For the landlords, they have an increased equity in the property and guaranteed repayment source from the rent boost by the Atlanta Housing. And the unsecured nature of the loan does not tie up their financial ability to grow their businesses. For contractors and businesses, well, focused on recruiting contractors with a focus on Black, Latinx, minority, women-owned businesses to do the projects. And the contractors gain access to low-cost capital with no dealer fees to expand their businesses. So results and lessons learned. So we were very excited about this program, worked very hard on it for quite a long time. And then we were able to raise $1 million from the Finance Justice Fund through Opportunity Finance Network. And that also came with a grant that allowed us to actually hire a boots on the ground to implement the program in Atlanta. So, you know, great. Everybody was like, wow, we want to see what the results are. And the results are actually good, but interesting. Not all good, not from a financing perspective. The Atlanta Housing Authority actually has retrofitted over 340 units with this rent boost program. However, we only finance 3. It's interesting. So what, you know, from a financing perspective, having raised all this capital for this, the question was, well, that's interesting. What happened? Is it that landlords don't need the money? Like what, you know, what is the lesson learned here? And there are a couple of things that happened. When we launched this program, the rent started to soar. So then all the housing authorities adjusted rents upwards without having to do anything. Landlords had to do nothing and they got rent boosts, to put it one way. The second thing is that there was a lot of dropout from affordable housing to market rates because of the rents being so high. So that was hard. And you can't control those kind of external situations. The biggest issue for us as a financing entity was that once we created the program and we launched it, we couldn't have access directly to the landlords. So we were kind of stuck. And because the rent boost and the capital was tied to this incentive program, the housing authority would go out and do the audit and could not share with us that that landlord was doing the audit to do the rent boost and could use our capital. And that was because of red tape. You know, the government programs sometimes are very restrictive in how much they can share information. So we had to rely on the Atlanta Housing Authority to try and set up some meetings where we could present and introduce ourselves and directly get the information from the landlords. Well, it's hard because everybody has their own job to do, and for them to promote us kind of with separate you know, in a separate way, just didn't work. So it was interesting for us. Thankfully, our capital was not restricted to the program, so we were able to finance many other home improvement loans across Atlanta and Georgia. But these are things that I think that everybody should consider when doing these programs. Is public-private partnerships can be very good and catalytic, but at the same time, there can be unseen barriers that need to be addressed from the beginning to make it successful for both parts. So the program has no way of locking in the units for affordability. That's another issue that we were grappling with, is what if we provide incentives for landlords to upgrade the properties? Now they have more equity. Now their property is more attractive. How do we make them stay in the housing choice voucher program as affordable housing? there's no answer to that. The one thing though to note is that in spite of, not great results for self from a financing perspective, we still consider the program itself to be a success from the perspective of having kind of tapped into what the main issue for not helping reduce energy burdens for renters is. And it boils down to incentive. I mean, incentives and policy, right? So the one thing we know is that this program is replicable, it's scalable, and can lead to many more positive results with greater access to landlord databases and shared marketing. So with that, I am going to jump into IRA stuff. And I have a question in the chat, but should I wait to the end, Joy? And
I would invite you to answer it. Yeah, now.
okay. So there's a question that says, this is Anaura. What does rent boost mean specifically? Does it mean that the rent pays? Yes, for each type of improvement made to the building. So the rent boost basically means an increase in the rent. So if they were getting paid $1,500, now they're going to get paid $1,675. So they're going to add $175 to the rent that the Atlanta housing is paying to the landlord in the house, in the voucher. So the landlord gets $175 more, which then would cover for the loan they would take out with us. And then after they're done paying the loan, if they take out a loan, then their rent remains higher than it would be without the improvements. I hope that answers the question. Yep. Okay. So, okay. Is there anybody else that has a question so far? Okay, let me see. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to try and kind of tie this, everything that I just shared with you, to IRA, Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and this historic opportunity that we have to advance climate goals with equity and inclusion. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, so I'm going to start with IRA opportunities to catalyze and really help boost energy reductions for renters. So the IRA funds will create more incentives for landlords to make these energy upgrades, whereas we were trying to do it with kind of on our own, the Atlanta Housing Authority ourselves. Now the IRA has many provisions that include incentives for building upgrades, like there is a $9 billion bucket for consumer home energy rebate programs and 10 years of tax credits for clean and energy efficient home improvements. Basically, if a landlord wants to now switch out gas stoves for electric and heating furnaces for heat pumps, they will be able to access, as owners of the building will be able to access not only rebates in quite significant amounts, but also tax credits, which is ultimately what landlords are looking for if they are in the business of having portfolios of properties. Property owners will also benefit from the workforce training programs required to implement retrofits and widening the domestic supply chain. Multifamily property owners who want to retrofit their existing properties can access $4.3 billion via rebates. That's a lot of money. This is nationwide, of course, but it's there. I mean, it's there for them to capture. Again, this is all about incentives. The owners can also receive an additional 30% credit for implementing solar power because now the ITC has been extended, and including geothermal heating for places that are cold. And this will continue over the next 3 years. And then there is also funding available, low-cost funding available for upgrades, including energy storage like batteries, solar batteries, electrification, and others. So this is just a screenshot of what you can all find, and this presentation is going to be shared, so there's a resource there. If you're not familiar with Rewiring America, I would invite you to go visit them. They're a very user-friendly site. It's a nonprofit. It's called rewiringamerica.org. And you can find the different types of rebates. It is kind of a maze, and it's hard right now to navigate because not all of the funding is actually available yet. There are some buckets that are still not dispersed, or allocated, but there are others that are already in place. So for example, the new energy efficiency home credit of 45L, you get provides up to $5,000 to developers who build homes that qualify for the energy zero energy ready home standard. This is for single family, multifamily, and manufactured homes, which is great because now manufactured homes is now part of the mix. Usually it's typically been kind of, left to the side, and it's important to address for LMI residents. Then you have the 25C residential energy efficiency tax credit. Then you have commercial buildings and energy efficient credit, 179D, and all these letters and codes in the end of the day are very difficult to navigate. But it's not hard to kind of pinpoint what you're looking for. If you're looking for commercial building energy efficiency efficient credit, then you can go straight to it, and you see that they're offering $2.50 to $5 per square foot for businesses achieving 25 to 50% reductions in energy use over existing building performance standards. So again, this kind of relates back to the program that we created before the IRA, which is to try and hone in on what incentives are there for landlords to invest in rental properties to reduce energy burdens, because they're naturally not motivated because there's nothing in it for them. So this is just an example of some of the benefits. And then I want to just talk quickly about the IRA and how these funds are going to be broken down. So almost a $400 billion pot of money. Most of these investments or these monies will be available through investments in tax credits that will catalyze private investment in clean energy, transport, and manufacturing to support resilient low carbon communities. There will be a bucket of grants deployed through local community organizations to ensure low income and disadvantaged populations access critical capital. And again, it's kind of like this waterfall effect where IRA can go through local governments, local jurisdictions, nonprofits. I'll show you in a minute. And then there's a direct pay, which is really, from our perspective, one of the biggest innovations is that low income households and residents have not been able to access the 30% ITC because they don't pay enough in taxes. And then nonprofits, of course, that don't pay taxes can't access the tax benefits of the 30% for solar and clean energy. With this new provision of the direct pay, the 30% is available through nonprofits to help low and moderate income communities benefit from the 30%. So an example would be Self sets up a fund. We actually do some solar leasing. The equipment is in our fund. We capture the 3%, the 30%, pass that on to the homeowner, reducing the cost of the solar installments by up to 30%, and then passing on those benefits. So those are some ways to work around that. So how does the IRA kind of work as this catalytic capital? It's going to flow through CDFIs, green banks, credit union, community-based organizations, developer networks, and others that are directly serving low and moderate income populations, because for the first time in history, these funds are earmarked mostly for low and disadvantaged communities. So this is a huge opportunity to really help transition these all communities in a more equitable way. The IRA funds will also leverage the private capital. The investments are focused on creating these sustainable and market-based solutions. So the different funding agencies, whether it's EPA, HUD, Department of Energy, DOI, all of them are looking for models that will leverage more private capital and eventually be able to sustain themselves in a marketplace. And the solutions should be designed to advance equitable and inclusive models to address historic racial and economic disparities. So this is just a slide that shows, this is now the greenhouse gas reduction in more detail. Out of the IRA, there are different buckets of funding. One of the ones that has gained the most attention is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And this is basically 27 billion to mobilize and leverage private capital for greenhouse gas emission reduction. This is done obviously through clean energy technologies, including energy efficiency and some climate resilience technologies as well. So the focus is on low income and disadvantaged communities, and the goals are to strengthen the capacity of the ecosystem to accelerate the transition to a cleaner energy economy. 7 billion of the 27 billion are going to flow through states, tribes, and municipalities, and some eligible nonprofits. The focus is largely on solar. And then 20 billion is going to go to eligible nonprofit intermediaries who are going to deploy and facilitate technical assistance and capacity building to strengthen the ecosystem of community-based organizations. Again, just an example of how these funds will flow. They're going to catalyze and leverage billions through these green banks, CDFIs, credit unions, developer contractor regional networks. 40% of the funds have to be invested in low income and disadvantaged communities, something to keep in mind. So just to end, I think I'm running out of time if I haven't run out already, but
You are all good.
okay, thank you. Really quickly, because I think that in the end of the day, all this kind of the question is, what does it look like on the ground? So I want to show you how SELF is an example of how to leverage the public funding and how we can kind of help maximize the benefits of the IRA. So for example, a client suffers from a severe storm damage. This is actually a true case with us. We had a client come, his home was deemed uninhabitable. He was in a hotel for almost a year. This was after Hurricane Irma. And his roof was destroyed. So his house is just about to be completely lost because there's a big gaping hole in his roof. FEMA finally gives him $5,000. He has no insurance. But the roof repair price is $18,000. So there's a gap of $13,000. So what does a person do? So for $13,000, he's going to lose the totality of his equity and his asset, the value of his home, whatever that is. 150,000, 100,000, 80,000, it doesn't matter. It's more than 13,000, right? So this is where SELF and other community organizations can step in. This client was low to moderate income, had zero credit score, not because he had defaulted on loans, but because he hadn't used credit for a very long time. He did not have sufficient savings and nobody would give him credit. So we basically, a contractor referred him to us and we were able to finance $13,000 for him and he was able to repair and save his home. So another example is when IRA funds or IIJA, which is the infrastructure funding, is going to be used to build out infrastructure, for example, a sewer system. This is an example in Martin County where they built out the infrastructure to convert septic to sewer because the septic tanks have leakages and they are a hazard to the environment, especially when it rains, et cetera, et cetera. So they had funding to build out the infrastructure, but then 400 homes along the lines had to connect. That connection is about $10,000 a pot. About 50% of the 400 homes were low to moderate income, did not necessarily have access to credit. Maybe some of them did, but to get $10,000 or $8,000 was difficult for them. And they certainly don't have that in savings because the average American, 42% of LMI clients or people in America have about $400 in savings. So they called us and we were able to customize a program whereby they went door to door and said, we're offering for you to connect and SELF is going to finance. Well, what's interesting is that they had $200,000 that they were going to use to directly finance these connections, which means they would have done about 20 projects. What we did is we told them, use your grants to buy down the loan, make it more accessible, and then we're going to bring in $2 million. Well, to date, we've deployed about $1 million. And again, this is catalytic, but it's also transformational in terms of the benefits for the homeowner accessing the sewer services and also benefits of the environment. And then our Green Home Programs, which is our flagship program, is again, loan program accessible to low credit score homeowners that will be able to leverage IRA tax benefits now, because every home improvement that we do with energy efficiency with our low cost capital based on ability to repay now is going to be able to also get rebates for our homeowners, such as in this picture, Carol and her friend, who is a widow, doesn't have a mortgage, but couldn't access credit and couldn't access financing to get a high efficiency air conditioner for her apartment while she was recovering from surgery. And again, we just launched a new pre-development and construction low-cost program to help these ladies in the picture, actually our first cohort of ladies that we're taking through training and technical assistance to develop affordable housing and become landlords and landowners of workforce housing. I'm very proud to be working with them. Again, they're going to be able to leverage IRA benefits because we're going to build with maximum energy efficiency benefits and also ready to go solar. So another example is a partnership with Miami-Dade County. We're doing a solar plus battery storage project to help ensure that vulnerable low-income clients living in this Gibson Plaza public housing building have access to an elevator when power outages happen and when hurricanes or storms happen. So we're solarizing the elevator shaft and an admin room to be able to keep medication safe as an emergency response. And resiliency home improvements, same thing. So I'm going to end by just showing you this slide. I'm going to leave this for you. Kind of talks about the different buckets of funding through the IRA. There's Department of Energy, EPA, HUD, where it says green bank funding, by the way, that is really intermediary. It's not green banks only, it's intermediaries. And then you all can take a look and see what all is available. So with that, thank you very much. And I hope we have enough time for questions.
Absolutely, we do. Thank you so much, Duanne, for that informative and fantastic presentation. We want to go ahead and field questions now that have come in from our audience. Joy, I'll welcome you to read those off if you would like.
Absolutely. So Steve Leeds asked, did you consider requiring keeping apartments in affordability position for any number of years in order to qualify for the loans?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yes, we did think about it. And yes, we did consider, but there wasn't a way that we could do that. You know, there just wasn't a way. In the case of the program with Atlanta Housing Authority, because it was their program, we couldn't impose that on their landlords, right? In the case of our independent program, because we also have this program available outside of the Atlanta Housing Authority, it's really hard because we don't have a mechanism to lock that in. And in the end of the day, we would probably lose a lot of landlords if we wanted to lock them in affordability. And the way we view things, and it's not everybody's, mission or way, it's not necessarily the better or correct way. It's just the way we look at things is, if we can implement energy efficiency savings, even if that house is not going to remain affordable or in affordability, we're already reducing carbon emissions. We're already moving the needle and advancing the mission. So we kind of look at it from that broader perspective of the broader mission.
Thank you. Robert asks, I believe this was the portion of your presentation when you were discussing nonprofits, but Robert asks, is a county government a nonprofit?
Is the county government a nonprofit?
That's correct.
No. So there is, government entity, and then there is nonprofits. So nonprofits, so for example, for the IRA funding will come through local governments like a county or even a city. Local jurisdictions can apply for the $7 billion bucket of funding through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Keep an eye out NOFO, meaning the rules of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, are going to come out in the summer. Applications are due, I think, by September, somewhere winter. And then in 2024, they're going to be dispersed. But local jurisdictions, nonprofits can apply for that. And then the sub bucket of 20 million is more geared towards community-based organizations that are actually the implementation and boots on the ground.
Thank you. Adora asks, with all the money available and while there are notable goals attached to using these funds, do you have any thoughts on ways to ensure that these funds are actually getting to communities that need them, taking the actual needs of local communities when funds are allocated, especially as the states are in charge of dispersing these funds and may have their own agendas?
Again, great question. So I think that there's two levels, right? Like, again, I'm going to refer to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund just because I know that there's a lot of attention on that. $7 billion are going through states. So community-based organizations such as ourselves, so CDFI, Community Development Finance Institution, or any other, or green banks perhaps, or a credit union, we're not going to be able to control how those funds are invested. The state is going to determine that. And that $7 billion bucket is really focused on solar and clean energy. So for example, things I expect states to do is, for example, solarize their public buildings, office, public buildings, housing. A lot of it is for housing. So, you know, their public housing buildings, perhaps where you can do some community solar, kind of like libraries or shelters, things like that, right? That are really in the interest of the communities, but also are kind of coming down from the state as dealing with climate impacts, whether it's heat waves or, you know, storms or sea level rise. So that bucket, we're not going to be able to determine what to do. They are going to have to report to EPA and to the federal government. So yes, there is accountability built into the funds. To the second piece, the 20 billion, those are not going to flow through states necessarily, which is why there's a big push right now. There's CDFIs, there's green banks, there's national housing developer networks, all of them positioning themselves and working on applying for these funds. Now, the EPA has already announced that they're going to be between 2 and 15 grantees because they don't have a capacity to administer 50 grants, right? This is $20 billion. And what they want to see is aggregation, meaning leveraging. So they're going to select a couple of venues of, you know, entities that can actually make sure that those funds reach disadvantaged communities. How do we ensure that? Well, we're going to be accountable. If we don't do it, then we have to give back the money. And when you're dealing with federal funds, trust me, we started with federal funds. It's a lot of reporting. It's a lot of accountability. So, I mean, it comes with a price to run these programs, but it's the only way to ensure accountability.
Thank you. One more question. Grace asks, what kind of nonprofits are eligible for greenhouse gas reduction funds? Or is there a resource I can use to better understand what groups are available or eligible for greenhouse gas reduction funds?
Yes, so you should go to EPA.gov, and then just if you Google it, and then you go in and you can look at the guidance for the greenhouse gas reduction funds, then you'll find a lot of information there on who and how you know, nonprofits qualify. There are some groups that are working on, you know, aggregating actors in the field. For example, if you're a CDFI, we're a CDFI, you may want to connect with either OFN or the CDFI coalition. Right now, they're actually in the Hill, Washington, as we speak. Connect with them and find out what they're doing, because, you know, this is not about one organization is not going to, like one nonprofit. I find it very hard for one nonprofit to actually get funding, right? It will be collaboratives. It will be kind of industry, maybe groups, right? So I would recommend you look at, depending on the type of nonprofit that you are, then look for the industry kind of collaborative, a place where you all meet, coalition, and then check and see what they're doing. Green banks are preparing applications, CDFIs, credit unions, national housing development organizations as well, possibly some scientific type or more research-driven organizations, perhaps like SIA, NRDC, National Defense Resource Fund, RMI. I mean, so I hope that, in a way, I know it confuses things more, but we don't know any specifics. I hope it helps inform you.
Thank you.
I think at this point, we can go ahead and thank our panelist, Duanne, for joining us today. Joy, can I invite you to go ahead and share screen again?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you guys are interested in following this series, this is a schedule of our expected webinars upcoming. We will share specific dates, times, and guests on our website. In addition, we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. In June, we are holding our first inaugural members-only meeting in Huntsville, Alabama. The details can be found on our website as well. And then in October of this year, the 25th to the 27th, SEA will be holding its annual Southeast Energy Summit here in Atlanta, Georgia. Join us and industry professionals to work together towards a healthier, more efficient, and prosperous region, all while having lots of fun and building great contacts. I'll go ahead and drop some links in the description as well. And do we have a question that popped up?
Yes, we have one more question.
Oh, go ahead. We'll go ahead and answer that while I drop some links.
Right, I'll read it out loud to you, Duanne. Final question. Scott asks, do you have an example of where an electric utility has assisted in these efforts? And if not, how do you envision them assisting?
Another great question. Yes, there are utilities that do on-bill payments, so I will follow up with you, but absolutely utilities can assist in this whole effort of ensuring greenhouse gas reduction funds benefits are, or IRA benefits are going back into the community. Mostly, I'm going to say cooperative types utilities, maybe municipal utilities are more accessible than large IOUs, but there are examples of large IOUs, investor-owned utilities, doing on-bill payments. So happy to follow up. Maybe Cyrus, you can plug something in there for the group in terms of on-bill payment plans with utilities.
Thank you so much for answering that. Last question. On that note, I'll just share a little bit of administrative details with y'all. Following today's webinar, we would appreciate your feedback by filling out the survey that pops up after the webinar closes. We want to bring the best type of content to you all. Please note that you will be receiving a recording link, any resources mentioned in the presentation, and slides shortly. Thank you to all, including our panelists and participants, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.